Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the webinar, the third webinar of our 2023 webinar series, which is O is for Operations, Optimal Performance in Ongoing Stormwater Treatment. We'll just wait while the last people come in through the lobby, and then we'll be able to get underway. So we'll be with you just very shortly. All right, so we'll make a start. Here we are. Let's get that ready. There we go. Welcome to our webinar, O is for Operations, Optimal Performance and Ongoing Stormwater Treatment. It's a webinar that will cover the operations and specifically maintenance for StormFilter. Our previous webinar that we had a couple of months ago was a deep dive into the StormFilter, around the design of the StormFilter, the operations of the StormFilter, and how it works as a treatment device. And we touched a little bit on maintenance through that process, and this is the continuation of that. Maintenance itself is a very hot topic, certainly among asset owners of not just treatment devices, but of any asset. And every single device and thing that you put in has to be maintained. And we have a lot of information around designing for maintenance, how these things are maintained. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today applies to both the StormFilter and other cartridge and media filtration devices. There are a lot of takeaways that we can have throughout this process that are both speak to the StormFilter and other devices. So here we are. And just a little bit about the two people speaking today. So I'm Matthew Howes. I sit within the sales team in Stormwater360 and recently moved to being the green infrastructure specialist, but have a lot of experience working on StormFilter designs of a wide range of different types of projects. And of course, whether it's a green asset or a cartridge asset, these devices need maintenance. And it's a pleasure today to welcome Yohanus Bogale from our engineering team.
Yes.
And Yohanus is our environmental product and design engineer. But I think it's fair to say with a specific emphasis on maintenance, you go and help out with a lot of maintenance and inspections of our devices.
Yes, definitely. So I work in the engineering team. I do a bit of designing, but mostly I focus on the inspection and the maintenance side of things. Yeah.
So it's something that we as a company are really keen to promote, is thinking about the whole life cycle of the product. And alongside Yohanus, there is Miles Henderson in our operations team and Danielle Smith, who is our asset maintenance specialist. And we provide support to across the country for the ongoing operation and maintenance of all our devices. And we're really proud as a company to provide that ongoing support throughout the life of the products. So a little bit about the webinar. We're going to do a little bit of an introduction and place the StormFilter within the context of other treatment devices and to look and see how the StormFilter operates. Then we'll think about why we need to maintain these devices, and not just the StormFilter, but all devices need maintenance. We'll then have a look at the inspection and the actual processes. What do we go through when we do maintenance of a StormFilter? And then we'll talk about our cartridge exchange program and how as a company we're supporting ongoing and good environmental outcomes. Throughout this whole webinar, if you have any questions, please use the chat function. I think the chat function should be working. Yep, so please put your questions in the chat function, and then at the end of the webinar, there'll be time for us to answer any questions that you might have. So here we go. What is the StormFilter? Now, as I say, we had a webinar a couple of months ago, and I strongly encourage you to go and watch that webinar if you missed it. It was a fascinating deep dive into the StormFilter. But some vital statistics about the StormFilter. In New Zealand, there's nearly 3,000 StormFilters that have been installed, and that's approaching 17,000 StormFilter cartridges. So every time it rains, there is a design treatment flow rate of nearly 20,500 litres per second. So that's quite a significant amount of StormFilters in New Zealand. Worldwide, there's estimated to be nearly 50,000 StormFilters worldwide. So as a company, as a product, we have an awful lot of experience with designing treatment devices and the StormFilter for good outcomes and for longevity. A little bit about stormwater contaminants, because it's important to think about what function the StormFilter is providing. So generally speaking, with stormwater contaminants, we characterize them often by the size of the particle that they are treating. And with different particle sizes, there are different treatment mechanisms and different treatment outcomes. And then within each of those different treatment outcomes, there are a range of devices that we have available to provide that level of treatment. So for example, litter is generally anything greater than 5 millimeters. And we use things like our litter trap and our Enviropod in the catch pits to capture 100% of trash. Things like coarse sediment. Coarse sediment is kind of generally 100 micron and up, but often median particle size of maybe 200 microns, so 0.2 millimeters. We use hydrodynamic separators and GPTs for that. Where the StormFilter sits is for fine sediment, and it uses filtration to achieve quite high removal percentages of a wide range of particle sizes, but typically with a median particle size of about 75 micron. So by using a media filtration process, we're able to get, on a long-term average basis, at least 80% TSS removal of quite a wide range of particles. What does that look like in practice? Well, here is a photo of the inside of a StormFilter. And this is why we're doing treatment, because without any form of structure in place, this washes straight out to the receiving environment, in this case to the Waitemata Harbour, and the StormFilter really provides an excellent solution to be able to remove that from the stormwater. So with the StormFilter, we have to weigh up the design of the device, of the treatment outcomes versus the ongoing maintenance. It's the practice when you're designing a BPO, best practicable option, is you have to trade off the performance with the total life cycle cost and then the ongoing operations and maintenance. It'll be very easy to provide a device that gets 100% or 90% sediment capture, but if you have to maintain that every week, every month, that's not viable in the long term. So we discussed this in our last webinar. There's a lot of ways that we've designed the StormFilter to have a lower ongoing operational burden that make it an easier device to own and maintain. So then a little bit about the StormFilter and how it works. The general idea behind the StormFilter is there is one cartridge, and then the cartridge operates in its own way, and then you add cartridges to increase the total treatment flow rate, depending on how much water you have to treat that's running off your catchment. So whether you have one cartridge or up to 580 cartridges or more, there's not going to be a change to the treatment outcome and very little change to the hydraulics and how the system operates. So that means that the StormFilter is one of the most scalable devices in that respect. There are a range of driving head options. As standard, we work for about 770 millimeters driving head, but we can reduce that if we needed for shallow sites. The other thing is with the manhole configuration on the StormFilter, we only need 30 millimeters fall through the device. So it's quite a useful solution when you're trying to retrofit into either an existing area or where you've got shallow pipes. The target contaminants with the storm filter, we can get things like, we spoke about sediments with using perlite for TSS. There's oils and grease that we get if they're attached to the sediment. Depending on the media, there's soluble heavy metals, organics, and nutrients as well. So there's quite a range of contaminants that we're getting with the storm filter. So then the filtration process and how the cartridge operates is quite integral to the ongoing maintenance and how we're designing for maintenance. So this is a cross section through the cartridge, and the cartridge sits the cartridge sits on top of a spigot and then under drain that's sitting in here. Storm flows then flow into the cartridge bay and into the cartridge. As water levels rises, air is expelled from underneath that hood via a one-way valve. Once the water level is at the top of the hood, the float and the ball valve then rise to allow water to flow to the underdrain manifold through that central column. Through this process, we start a siphon. So the water is flowing horizontally through the media, but across the whole height of the cartridge. As the water then drains down, once the storm event stops, that siphon is broken and then bubbles physically go up and agitate the side of the media. That's really important because what that means is we're getting a lot of the sediment that might otherwise blind on the media, and we're dropping that into the sump. The seal at the bottom of the unit is not a perfect seal, however, so all of the water drains down. So there's no standing water then left in the storm filter. So all of that has been designed both for good treatment outcomes and ongoing maintenance, as we'll find out shortly. I'm sure you'll all be familiar with the standard manhole configuration of storm filters, but they do come in all shapes and sizes. We also have precast vaults that come delivered to site, or we have built-in situ storm filters as well. So there are a range of options that we can custom design to suit your site. Then lastly is the important thing to think about is the treatment mechanism, because the treatment mechanism often then dictates the maintenance requirements of that treatment device. So with the storm filter, it is siphon activated radial media filtration system. So that means that the water is flowing from the outside through to the inside and down then out the central column across the whole height of the cartridge. There is physical filtration using the perlite media. There is cation exchange with the zeolite media. And then carbon provides adsorption and absorption of hydrocarbons and some more metal removal. And one of the absolute key things with the storm filter and especially the use of perlite is that perlite itself is a depth filter, and we covered this in quite a lot of detail in the previous webinar. But with a sand filter, most of the contaminants then stay at the surface. Whereas with perlite, both within the media itself and between the media particles, the sediment gets absorbed all the way through. So you'll see in some photos coming up that the sediment doesn't sit solely at the edge of the cartridge, it's all the way through. Perlite is a depth filter. So that is integral to how we approach maintenance, both in how we think about maintenance and how we then physically do the maintenance. So I guess the crux of this webinar and the crux of a lot of our questions from consultants and clients is, why do we have to maintain the device? Well, all assets need maintenance to maintain their functionality, whether it's a road, a wetland, or a rain garden, or a storm filter. Devices have to be maintained, especially treatment devices as well. Treatment devices are designed to specifically remove contaminants from runoff. So periodically, we will need to remove the contaminants from the devices so they keep functioning. If you think of it in the same way as a vacuum cleaner, you have to empty your vacuum cleaner when it gets full, so you have to maintain a storm filter periodically. And of course, the maintenance will depend on the site, the nature of the catchment, and the amount of rainfall you get. Typically, the amount of rainfall that Christchurch gets means that they have slightly less maintenance, less regular maintenance than we might do, say, up in Auckland. The other reason to maintain specifically a proprietary or a manufactured treatment device is they are designed to operate in an ongoing manner, assuming that maintenance has been achieved. So we know that the StormFilter will achieve 80% TSS removal if it has been maintained and the media is functional. Regular maintenance, therefore, of a manufactured treatment device will guarantee that you are achieving that 80% sediment removal. So if the StormFilter has been put in as part of a resource consent and there are monitoring conditions, if you maintain the StormFilter, you should then be getting the treatment outcomes that you're expecting. Regular maintenance as well also lowers the life cycle cost of the treatment device. You can see in this picture here that there's quite a lot of sediment in the sediment bay. It's well up above the hoods, and we'll discover, Yohanus will tell us why that's quite an issue shortly. And there's a lot of sediment sitting on the top here, and it's highly likely that media is going to be completely full of sediment as well. The maintenance of this device is going to be much more tricky than the maintenance of a device that has been more regularly maintained. So regular maintenance lowers the life cycle cost. And as we discussed in our previous webinar, the StormFilter has been designed to make it the most economical media filter to maintain and own in the long run. And I alluded to the fact that proprietary treatment devices are designed to perform if they are maintained. So regular maintenance will guarantee the treatment outcomes and the treatment performance that you are expecting from that device. A lot of councils are now looking to either see maintenance records or a signed maintenance contract as part of their compliance monitoring process. So both from an environmental perspective and then a consent perspective, maintenance is ever important. So we know that we have to maintain. So what are some good maintenance practices? And this is more of a theoretical idea, and something that we try and push quite a lot is inspect to maintain. With treatment devices, it's really important that we adopt an inspect to maintain philosophy. We don't need to provide maintenance every year, nor can we leave a device for 5 years without even checking that it is still operating and still functional. So we strongly advocate both for our devices and for other devices for an inspect to maintain philosophy. So what does that mean in a practical sense? Well, Yohanus is going to run through what some of the triggers for the maintenance of a StormFilter are. Yohanus is going to talk about the inspection processes and what to look for with a StormFilter. And it's important to realize that the triggers for maintenance are not based on time, they're based on the amount of sediment, the amount of contamination within the device. So typically a maintenance interval for a normal site, typical runoff will be about every 18 months, but some sites will be less than 12 months. Some sites could easily be 3 to 5 years before you need to maintain that device. So we will never guarantee a maintenance interval because we simply do not know what is going to be the type of runoff from that site. And we simply can never guarantee a length of time that the media will last because the site-specific factors have a huge effect on that maintenance frequency. So that's really important, is we're never going to say you have to maintain a StormFilter every 12 months, nor are we going to say that a StormFilter will last 4 or 5 years before you need to replace the media. It simply depends on the site. And here's Yohanus doing some good work inspecting a StormFilter, working out if it needs to be maintained. And of course, the last thing that we can do, and again, we spoke about this quite a lot in our previous webinar, is it's really important then, if we know we have to do inspections before we maintain, that we design for maintenance. So we either want to place the storm filter in an easily accessible location with a set-down bay, out of a road corridor, out of a main access way. Can we reduce the amount of traffic management that needs to be required? Because that will reduce the maintenance cost and the ongoing maintenance on the filter. We can design for sediment mass load. We can add cartridges to accommodate more sediment within the device before it needs to be maintained. In this instance here, you can see in the photo, there's a swale that is then draining to a storm filter. The storm filter is in that scruffy dome. So we're applying here a treatment train, and the swale provides a lot of pre-treatment upstream of the storm filter, which reduces the maintenance burden on the storm filter. So if you do all of this, that can help manage the maintenance intervals, to extend maintenance intervals, say from 18 months to 2 or 3 years, and it will help decrease the maintenance costs and keep the life cycle cost of the product under control. So that's a little bit of an approach to how Stormwater360 views maintenance of our devices and maintenance of treatment devices. So now I'll hand over to Yohanus, and we'll talk about, first off, the inspection process.
Thanks, Matthew. So Matthew talked about what the storm filter is, how it operates, maintenance requirements, not just for the storm filter, but any treatment device, as well as designing for maintenance. So now when we get into the inspection part,
Yep. There we go.
Firstly, why do we recommend inspect to maintain philosophy? And the reason for that is not every site has the same land use, doesn't have the same sediment loading or contaminant loading, which would have an impact on the maintenance interval of the treatment device. So a standard design or standard storm filter device that treats conventional stormwater runoff, such as from local roads or commercial car parks, can have a maintenance interval of approximately 18 months. But if the site is clean and you have good source controls in place, then the maintenance interval can be extended. And if the site is very dirty, then the maintenance requirement will be more frequent. And as a result, for standard designs, we recommend inspection, at least a minimum of 1 annual inspection for the first 2 to 3 years. And for industrial sites or high contaminant generating areas, we recommend 6 monthly inspections for the first 2 years. And that allows us to determine what the maintenance frequency or the maintenance requirement is. We do also recommend to inspect after large storm events or chemical oil spill. And that's just to make sure the storm filter is in a good condition and it can continue to operate as designed. So when we get into the next part, so what is required for inspection, or what do we need for inspection? Firstly, is health and safety. So we need confined space, working at heights, and site safe certifications. Notifying work safe at least 24 hours prior to work. Doing job safety analysis and a pre-start, and also getting a permit from the asset owner, as well as a site induction. And some of the equipment that will be required to do the inspection will be, as you can see in the picture, traffic management. So that would be cones, barriers, and signage, gas detector, and that's just to make sure before entering the confined space that it's safe to enter, as well as while continuing to do the inspection. And also tripod and harness, and that is to safely access and exit the storm filter device. And the next slide. So this is a quick overview of what needs to be reviewed during the inspection of the storm filter. It is important to understand the storm filter comes in different sizes and configurations, but this is a cross-sectional view of a storm filter vault system. And some of the components that you need to inspect would be for bay, the treatment bay. This will be where the cartridge will be contained, as well as the outlet bay and overflow weir, as well as the under drains. And that's just to make sure everything is operating as designed. So the main storm filter inspections will be conducted in the treatment bay for the obvious reasons. This is where the treatment occurs, and this is where the filter cartridges are contained. So the first thing we'll need to check for would be the accumulation of sediment on the vault floor or manhole floor. And you can typically see this as you open the access cover, but we do recommend measuring the depth of that. And the reason why we need to inspect the sediment depth is, as you can see the cartridge picture here. Yeah, from the floor of the vault or the manhole to the bottom of the cartridge hood, that's approximately about 150 mils. So we do not want the sediment depth to be higher than the bottom of the cartridge hood. And the reason for that is so flows can enter freely and there is no impeding of the flows. We also recommend checking for oil grease levels, floatables, and also checking the mesh as well to make sure that's not blocked. The good thing about the StormFilter here is the cross-sectional area of that inlet into the cartridge is quite big. And for that reason, I guess the chances of blocking would be quite low unless the StormFilter had been in service for quite a long time. And we also recommend checking for any standing water within the StormFilter. And the reason for that is the StormFilter is designed to be free draining. And if there hasn't been a rainfall event in the past 24 hours and you see standing water, that should raise a question. A maintenance may be required, but firstly, we also recommend checking downstream to make sure there's no, for example, tidal effect from downstream. Or sometimes it could be some, I guess, concerns with the design where the downstream network or the outlet from the downstream network is set at the higher elevation point. So that could result in permanent water in the StormFilter. So it's always good to check around the system, not just the StormFilter. Another maintenance trigger that we recommend definitely checking is the condition of the media. And this is typically quite easy to do with the StormFilter. We can quickly show how easy that can be.
Let's stop showing the screen and we'll show you just the process, because that, again, one of the things with having the StormFilter being without standing water is quite important from an access perspective and an inspection perspective. But the other thing is just how easy it is to view the media. So how do we inspect the media?
So this is the cartridge. One of them we have is the 46 centimeter cartridge. And just to show you how easy it is to check the condition of the media, is the first thing you need to do would be removing the cap. Once you do that, then you can remove the hood, which gives you an access to the media. So from here on, you can check the condition of the media. And here we have a brand new media. So as you can see, in the picture, you can see there's grading of the media from 1 to 5.
I can't see it at the moment.
We can see. I'll quickly.
But one of the key things with this is that you can inspect the media without using any bolts, anything. You don't have to suck out a sump. You can very quickly and easily get in just to see the media.
100%.
So let's put this away. Bam. And then we can.
Perfect. So we rate the condition of the media from 1 to 5, as you can see in this picture. 1 is a newly installed media, which hasn't been used. 2 would be slightly used, and 3 would be used, and 4 would be dirty, and 5 would be extremely dirty, as you can see in the picture. Sometimes, making this calls can be hard. For example, to see the difference between 3 and 4. So in this case, what you can do is you can dig down into the media to get a better analysis of the media. And if the condition of the media is from 4 to 5, then maintenance will be required. And to check if the media is occluded or not is you can grab the media and squeeze it and see if it clumps. If it clumps, that means the media is occluded and maintenance will be required. And it's important to understand it's not always that you need a full cartridge exchange. Sometimes it could be, you can see the sediment depth on the vault floor is quite high, but when you check the media condition, it could be a 3 or a 2. So in that case, you don't need to change the media, but we would recommend vacuuming out the accumulated sediment. And you can leave the media as it has a bit of life left in it until the next inspection or maintenance period. Another maintenance triggers that you can see within the StormFilter system would be if you see accumulation of sediment or sedimentation on top of the cartridge, that indicates the water level is frequently getting above the cartridge, which means the water level is getting higher than what's designed for. So that could be an indicator that maintenance may be required. Another thing is tick scum line, which again, that shows you the water level is getting above. So if the scum line is above the cartridge cap, then that could indicate that maintenance will be required, as well as clogged media. As you can see, there is no space between the granules. Yeah, that definitely is a requirement for maintenance, as well as if the water level is above the cartridge bottom also, and there hasn't been a rainfall event in the last 24 hours, and there is no issue downstream, then that means maintenance is definitely required. As mentioned earlier, so the forebay is typically in the vault system, and sometimes vault system may not have it, but typically larger StormFilter systems would have a forebay just to buffer the incoming flow, and this also allows some sedimentation of coarse sediment. So in this case, we recommend checking the sediment or the trash level to make sure there's no blockage, as well as considering as components like the energy dissipator or the ski jump to make sure there's no concerns. And the next part will be is checking.
And as I say, that's an excellent example why pre-treatment is really good and reduces the maintenance burden, because pre-treatment would remove all of this from the inlet bay, reducing the maintenance requirements of that storm filter.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So the last check within the StormFilter system will be done in the outlet bay. So this is at the inward of the structure, there shouldn't be any blockage. And if you see any I guess trash or buildup of sediment, which shouldn't happen, you may come across that sometimes. So in that case, we recommend vacuuming out that to make sure there's no blockage and the system can operate as designed. Yeah, so the main checks, as I said, is done within the StormFilter system, but it's always good practice to check the surrounding of the system, which usually gives us an answer to why things are happening with the StormFilter system. So checking both upstream and downstream manhole, and as an example, as was mentioned earlier, if there's a standing water, we recommend checking, for example, downstream to see if there's any tidal influence, which could give you the answer to why that is happening. And yeah, we always recommend taking photos, documenting any concerns that you see, which gives us, answers to why things are happening. So after the inspection and you come across that maintenance is required, the next question will be, how do we do maintenance? What are the things that are required to do the maintenance? So when we get into that, so the setup will be the same as the inspection. You will need traffic management, health and safety certifications, as well as also a permit from the asset owner and a site induction. And in terms of equipment, the only thing that you need that's different from the inspection part is a vacuum truck. And the reason for that is you need that to obviously vacuum out the sediment and the media. So the steps are, the first thing is removing the used cartridges. The next part would be cleaning out the bolt. And lastly would be replacing the cartridges with a new or refurbished cartridge. So the first step is removing the StormFilter cartridges. And the first thing you should do is removing the cartridge cap, the hood, and the float, which gives you access to the media. From then on, the contractors will vacuum out the used media, and we recommend doing this as much as possible. And the reason for that is, in the used state, these cartridges can be quite heavy, and therefore we recommend vacuuming as much as possible before removing it from the spigot. And once you have vacuumed as much as possible, then we recommend unscrewing the cartridges and tipping out the remaining media onto the vault floor. And we also recommend blocking the exposed spigots just to make sure none of the contaminated sediment or water is escaping the system. And you can definitely get these plumbing attachments from most suppliers. And once you do that, then you can reassemble the empty cartridge, and you can attach the empty cartridge to the lifting apparatus where the contractor can lift it up to the surface. And you repeat all this process until all the cartridges are out of the system. And the next slide will show you some videos on how this is done.
Get this working. Here we go.
There you go. So in this video, you can see one contractor is removing the cap and the hood to gain access to the media, while the other one is vacuuming out the media as much as possible before they remove it from the spigot. And this video shows us the contractor has managed to vacuum out most of the media, and they are removing it from the spigots, while they have also managed to reassemble the empty cartridge. And you can see they'll be lifting it from the vault into the surface. And they will repeat this process until all the cartridges are out of the system. So once all the cartridges are out of the system, the next step will be vacuuming the excess paint media and sediment, and also trash from the vault floor, and also vacuuming out the forebay, the outlet bay as required. And once that's done, then just water blasting the vault clean while continuing to vacuum. Yeah, and this video shows us this step where they are water blasting it while also they continue to vacuum out the water. So once that's done, once all the cartridges are removed and the vault is cleaned, the next and the final step will be replacing the cartridges. So this can be a refurbished or a brand new cartridge with a fresh media in it. And then you can lower the cartridge using the tripod and pulley system. We recommend doing this carefully, as this can be approximately about 23 kgs in most cases. And yeah, and then you install all the replacement cartridges. Once each cartridge is installed, then you can exit the vault and secure the access covers. And the waste disposal should be done in accordance with the local guidelines. Yeah, so that is basically the maintenance part of things. And once the inspection, the maintenance is done, the contracts usually generate a maintenance or inspection report, which will be made available to the asset owner and also to Stormwater360 on request. And these reports are evidence to the device owners and council operational treatment outcomes and consent compliance. Yeah, so I'll hand it back to you, Matthew.
Very good. Thanks, Yohanus. I think it's always interesting because a lot of designers and engineers work at the design and conceptual side, and we get to the point where we deliver the device to site, but there's a whole side and life of the device that's well beyond its sign off, and it's great to see the ongoing maintenance and the processes involved. So lastly, we'll just touch on the cartridge exchange program. And this is something that Stormwater360 are really proud to offer. And we're quite unusual, I think, in the market to offer this. We offer a lifetime warranty on the StormFilter cartridges. So not on the media. We can't warrant the life of the media. The media is irreplaceable. It is expendable, as you've seen. Once the media gets full and completely full of sediment, it will need to be replaced. But if the maintenance of the StormFilter is done by a contractor who has been trained by Stormwater360 and is signed up with the cartridge exchange program, we offer a lifetime warranty on the cartridges. So that cartridges get sent back to us, we then clean them, refurbish them, and then send them out for use on another another filter. This allows us to have circular reuse of the materials. It's better for the environment. It's better for everyone. And we fix up and make sure then that everything is being refilled, designed, rebuilt to the standards that mean we will get the treatment outcome. So the media is specifically filled using our methodology, using the correct type of perlite, the correct type of zeolite and carbon. And that allows then assurances that on an ongoing perspective, you'll achieve that. So the lifetime warranty is something we're quite proud of and would love to see more use. But alongside that, it's all very well having a lifetime warranty on the cartridges, but the maintenance needs to be done in a clean, consistent way across way across the country. And Stormwater360 ourselves, we don't provide maintenance on the storm filters. The maintenance is done by third-party providers. Yes, we do refill the cartridges, but the actual maintenance is done by third-party providers. So we require that contractors undertake a maintenance training course for certification before they can go onto our cartridge exchange program. And we have a training program that allows national coverage for the maintenance of our devices. And we're always keen to hear from more maintenance providers who would wish to undertake maintenance of the storm filters and our other devices. Having this maintenance training platform allows us to have national coverage. We sell storm filters across the country, so it's really important that there are maintenance providers across the country. And it provides everyone with an equal platform, both for pricing and technical assistance and a standardized approach to maintaining the treatment devices. And what's really important for us is we're putting these filters in the ground to provide good water quality outcomes. So it's really important then that the maintenance is done to those same high standards to which the devices are manufactured, to assure then that we're getting that quality of water on a long-term basis. So there will be more coming on the maintenance training and training for our maintenance providers coming very shortly. So do watch this space here. So that's a little bit then, that kind of ties up everything around the maintenance of storm filters in particular. We've touched on overview of treatment and where the storm filters sit, how storm filters are a filtration device providing really high performance treatment for quite a wide range of contaminants. So sediment, hydrocarbons, nutrients, metals, a lot of different ranges of contaminants, but also of filtration of quite fine sediment sizes. We've understand how the storm filter works and how it's been designed to be one of the most economical media filtration devices to own and maintain. And we've also talked about approaches to maintenance and why an inspect to maintain philosophy is what Stormwater360 strongly recommends. And then we've spoken about the maintenance processes, the inspection processes, and the cartridge exchange program. So that's the end of the webinar. But if you have any questions, please do put those in the chat function, and we'll look to answer those now. So I'll just get rid of this, and so there we go. Now we can go in. So we've had a few questions already, which is fantastic. So let's go through those. Let's go through those to start with. So Jagath asks, what is the volume of sediment and debris moved per year in the Auckland region? That's a really good question. And I think it's something we touched upon and something Yohanus touched upon, is it really depends on the site and how clean the site is as to how much sediment we remove. Source controls is a big factor to the amount of sediment that the storm filter will have to remove. Typically, our sediment mass load is 300 kilograms per hectare per year.
Yes, so for ecosystem standard sites would be 300 kgs per hectares per year in the Auckland region, I believe, and that's based on the TP10 guideline.
For some sites, that'll be more.
100%. So some sites where, for example, there's more traffic or there's more activity, or depending on the land use, that sediment loading per hectare will be different. And therefore, yeah, so how much you remove would be really dependent on that as well. Yeah.
And it's not something, Jagath, that I think we could probably work out an estimate, but it would be hard to give a definite number based on actuals. But we typically do work to 300 kilograms per hectare per year, with variations on that depending on the site. Both Jagath and Victoria have asked, Julia, sorry, have asked if there'll be a PDF. The presentation will be made available to rewatch afterwards, and if you're after a PDF, I'm sure we can get something along those lines to you. Julia asks a really good question. Is detailed maintenance info and tips provided to the customers in the O&M? So O&M manuals, maybe let's touch upon that. That's a really good question, Julia. What information are we able to provide?
With the O&M manual, I guess we talk about inspection, things we just discussed about as well, what things to look out for, what are the maintenance triggers, and as well as a touch up on how the maintenance can be done as well. And yeah.
Because I think, again, Julia, the actual maintenance is usually not done by the asset owner. It's done by a contractor employed by the asset owner that is accredited by Stormwater360 to provide that maintenance. And it's something that we don't provide O&M manuals for all our devices, because for us to provide an O&M manual, we need building consent, we need as-builts, we need a lot of information that we can then create a full O&M manual rather than a draft O&M manual. But it's a conversation that we're always happy to have with the asset owner, is around good maintenance practices. And certainly those asset owners that we have very good working relationships with, Yohanus, you go and do inspections, and Ruel does inspections within our ops team, quite often for a number of assets.
Yeah.
And it's something that we're always happy to talk about. Daniel asks a really good question. And does the third maintenance provider arrange for the vacuuming truck? So, and I'm gonna add a little bit to that question, Daniel. So Yohanus, I'm gonna ask you the question. So firstly, who organizes the vacuum truck? But secondly, do you need a vacuum truck at everything? Do you need a vacuum truck for every inspection? Or do you need a vacuum truck only when we do maintenance itself?
Yes, so as discussed earlier, so for the inspection, you do not need a vacuum truck. So all you would need would be just traffic management and tripod and harness to gain access to the StormFilter to do the inspection. But once you realize that the maintenance is required, then that's when the vacuum trucks comes to play, and that is definitely provided by the maintenance contractor. I guess this is standard that they do have vacuum trucks to conduct the work.
Yeah, and that's something, Daniel, that's quite important as well, is how we've designed the StormFilter is you do not need a vacuum truck to inspect the device. That would add so much cost if every time you went to look at it, we had to have a vacuum truck. And the fact that the cartridges, the hoods unscrew really easily, and the fact that there's no standing water that you need to suck out means that it is very quick, simple and straightforward to do that inspection without the vacuum truck. But great question. The boardroom in botany, and I can't see which boardroom. A boardroom in botany nonetheless has asked, do the inspections have to be carried out by a certified individual in order to comply with the lifetime warranty conditions? That's a great question. Do you know that, Yohanus?
Yeah, I believe that needs to be done by a maintenance contractor or a contractor that's been, I guess, trained by us to get a really good understanding of how the treatment device operates. Again, what are the maintenance triggers? So they have the understanding from our side. So I believe they need to be trained by us who's in the contractor training program to do the inspection.
Airy, fantastic. Great to have you along, Aries. And of course, something that you will find out when we get to announce it is we are endeavoring to make that information as freely available as possible in the coming months to empower everyone, whether it's contractors or asset owners, to have that information at their fingertips.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Any other questions out there? I've got a question. So, Yohanus, you've been to see quite a few storm filters.
Yes.
You've been to see them in the ground after they've operated, and been to see devices that have needed maintenance and haven't needed maintenance. What are maybe your kind of top 3 learnings from inspecting storm filters and going to see storm filters? What's kind of 3 main takeaways that you could give to those watching the webinar to make maintenance easier and more straightforward?
I guess one of the main things I would say is definitely is, as we talked about earlier as well, that a full cartridge exchange is not always required. So definitely doing inspection and checking everything. And once sometimes you don't need to replace the media. So definitely I would say that's important. In terms of to make it efficient, I think the StormFilter is quite efficient in terms of checking, inspecting very quickly. Does not take long, and is, I guess, cost-effective way of actually establishing a maintenance frequency. The third thing would be, just really considering all the components. That's quite important. Yeah.
Good quality design, not just of the hydraulics, I think, but access for maintenance.
Exactly, that's quite important.
Yeah. Jagath's got an interesting question here. How can we compare the well, I assume with the 360 product, Jagath, you meaning the StormFilter, but how can we compare the StormFilter with the Enviropod? And the answer is really no. The Enviropod as a catch pit insert has been designed, it's a very high performing catch pit insert, but it's designed to capture 100% of trash and everything greater than 200 micron. So the Enviropod has been around since the beginning of Stormwater360, so that's 27 years now. And it's a stainless steel basket that sits in the bottom of the catch pit with a liner bag that sits inside that basket. And that's capturing everything greater than 200 micron. Now, that is, as catch pit inserts go, is very high performing, but the StormFilter is capturing 80% of TSS with a mean particle size of 75 micron. So the mean particle size that the StormFilter is capturing is quite a lot smaller than the Enviropod. And it will also, depending on how it's been designed, and there's a bunch of conditions that affect the treatment outcomes and treatment performance, but it's likely going to be capturing particles that are even finer than that still. So the StormFilter is equivalent to a GDO1 type device at 75%, or it's getting generally 80% sediment removal, whereas the Enviropod as a catch basin insert is still achieving fantastic outcomes, but isn't operating on quite the same treatment level. So there are some differences there, both in terms of operations and then ongoing maintenance. So, question then, really good question from Daniel, and this is something that kind of leads to some bigger discussions. Maybe we'd always keen to have these discussions with councils. How do we track if each storm filter has been regularly inspected or maintained, as the inspection maintenance can be undertaken by different maintenance providers? Well, we can't track when inspections have been done. If we provide inspections, if Yohanus goes to do an inspection, obviously we write an inspection report and Yohanus tells us that he's been to a site.
Yeah.
But if the inspections have been provided by a third-party provider, we don't necessarily know that inspections have occurred. But maintenance is the first thing that Danielle asks when we get asked for new cartridges is which device is being maintained. So we do have a list of all of the devices that have been maintained and when they have been maintained using our cartridge exchange program. And that's really important, that we do know which devices are being maintained, because every single storm filter that has been supplied into New Zealand has been specifically designed for that catchment, that site, that location. So it's really important that we know the cartridge height, the type of media, if the flows have been restricted, if there's any site-specific or device-specific things that mean that we have to provide a certain type of cartridge to the contractor. So we do keep track of the maintenance of the storm filters, but we're not in a position, because a lot of the inspections are done by third parties, to keep track of the inspections. But that's a really good question, and is something that, of course, then from a compliance monitoring perspective, would be an interesting thing to look at linking in and linking together as well. And then Julie's asked us another question. Some great questions here. Loving it. Have we considered how we might enable inspection of filters without confined space entry, i.e. specialized devices to enable removing, unscrewing lids and replacing covers? Absolutely. I mean, I can talk. Any insights from the engineering team into that?
I mean, we haven't quite established that yet. It's just because to check the condition of the media, you really have to, I guess, get insight. But there can be some ways. I guess we can have a look at in the future, maybe based on the water level that you see. For example, the scum line can be an indicator that maintenance is required, as well as just having maybe water level sensors, something like that. So yeah, it is definitely something we can have a look at moving forward.
And it's certainly from both the Stormwater conference, the water conference, I was at an industrial waters conference recently. Smart monitoring and smart technology is very much, it's very established now, and part of the process is of course to understand, can this be applied to remotely monitor and assess the current status of stormwater treatment assets. The, of course, big challenge with that is the associated costs that are involved, because smart monitoring, provides great automation, but it does come at a cost, and a lot of times clients are looking for an economical solution, as what can they do in the most economical fashion, rather than to have full smart monitoring here. So Selena has asked us as an interesting question. Do you have any report conference papers that highlight device effectiveness while considering varying intensities and durations of rainfall events across New Zealand? Clearly, there's a lot of information around treatment device performance in relation to influent concentration of contaminants and around rainfall intensity. There's also a lot of research that has been undertaken in terms of different types of contaminants and how they are mobilized by different types of rainfall events. So there will be information that we can provide to you, absolutely, that speaks further to this matter. And that's certainly something maybe that would be good to have as a separate conversation, as opposed to kind of focusing on the maintenance. And lastly, Leon has replied to something with Daniel. As a regulator, so Leon working is a great friend at Auckland Council. As a regulator responsible for monitoring consents, he can confirm that asset owner consent holder is responsible for holding records of maintenance and providing them on request and part of the reporting requirements. So absolutely, and we are in a position where we can assist with that process, and that is why we are so proud of the Cartridge Exchange program and the support and education that we try and provide to the market, both through our contractor training programs and webinars like this, through conversations that we have with clients on a day-to-day basis. And when people call up Yohanus and ask him for a design, we'll talk about this. And at the Stormwater conference, Yohanus and some of our team hosted a workshop on maintaining these stormwater devices. So it's something that we really feel strongly about, but obviously we need the rest of the industry to get on board to support that as best as possible. So with that, thank you very much, Yohanus. for your input.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and for some really, really interesting and thought-provoking questions throughout the Q&A process. We'll leave that there for today. But of course, if you have any questions at all about the design, inspection, maintenance, or ongoing operations of treatment assets, whether it's storm filters or Filter or anything else, please do get in touch with us and we'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. Thank you all, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you.